Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Jeff. I just wanted to do a full report of my experience through the RTN season and some of the things that I think worked, didn't work, and improvements I think, and where I have this list at the end. And providing just all that info so that you guys can use it how you will. So, to start out, my RTN season started week one with me top fouring with the first version of the list. I don't have it here, but I top forward and then went against Kano. You can kind of guess how that went if you haven't seen the video. I lost. Week two, I got sick with the flu that's been going around. I was down and out. I almost missed week three as a result still. Week three, I knew, okay, I can only go to one this weekend because everywhere else is super far away. But honestly, I do not want to deal with that many Viscerai because I feel like there's going to be a lot of Viscerai because he's about to leave. So I scouted around, and at 34 people, I determined that there were 5 Ishrai, 5 Wizard, and a Scepter of Pain Florin, which, if you know, that build is basically impossible to win with the way that this build is set up. And I was like, okay, I would like to enjoy my event and not have a third of the matchups that exist in the room be auto losses. So I said, I'm not playing Riptide today. I am just going to sit here and try and play Florian, a regular like Channel Mount Heroic Florian given to me by someone I know, and it did. I did well. I got ninth. Unfortunately, I got a bubble out, which that always sucks. But I think I did pretty good with basically less than 10 reps on the deck. So that's. I just wanted to learn it, get the experience, generate a little bit of elo. It was nice. Week 4 is where things kind of. I struggled this weekend. I got both top 8s. I 5-1'd. Both on the Saturday one, I lost round one, won out the rest. Did the opposite on Sunday, where I won all 5 rounds and then lost the final round, but I was still seed 1. Saturday, I, in top 8, went against the same Syndra that resulted in me changing the way that I approached the crew traps into that matchup, which was cutting down to 4. Turns out this person in particular really gives me bad luck with crew traps because the same situation happened, and now I want to cut down to 3 versus Syndra. So what ended up happening is I was at 8, they were at 3. I had Trench still, and I had Deterministic Lethal Wind deck. I had 2 crew traps, Quiver has not been used, I had about 50% of the deck that could reload, and I had not reached pit stack. And I had a Calming Breeze and a Shelter left in deck. I was set. I literally just had to block out, and I deterministically kill him. He had no shelters in the entire deck, so I didn't have to worry about that. I literally just had to kill him based on damage ping, and I was good. Unfortunately, I drew a hand of 2 non-reloading cards of just 2 arrows and 2 crew traps. And the end result was me dying to exact lethal. If one of those cards was not a crew trap, I could have just arsenaled it and then lived at 3 life and then went to the next turn and probably killed them or at least survived another turn cycle to kill them. That was the only case and scenario. Those crew traps were literally placed because I didn't resolve any plan for the worst. Those crew traps were literally placed at the start of the game, never moved. So I literally lost due to that. It feels really bad to lose that way. And I was guaranteed pretty much to make it to the finals and probably win because my next matchup would have been New, which is free. And then the matchup after that was Ira, which is that particular build was a little bit more aggro. So that matchup is also pretty close to free, but it still can be choppy. But I was very confident in that matchup. Unfortunately, I lost it at top 8. The second event, I was first seed, went against Vincent. The problem with the list that was really extenuated in that situation is that whenever they decide to set up, I can't convert the hand enough to force them to block and set up less, or at least get to their life total to a range that they have to start giving me more cards and having less bursty turns, which is really important in that matchup. So I didn't have Bolt and Shot on the list, and I think that it's actually required. We kept tempo pretty well. I was doing good. The one turn I was trying to convert the sharpshooter flight path combo. Unfortunately, I couldn't convert it because I had to block out based on the on hits or on damage, whatever you want to call them. And then from there, I couldn't catch back tempo because I had to block out, and I was too low of life. They had too much life, and once we started walking down and I started being in a good spot, they ended up playing a dirge, and then the generate 4 rune chance. I forget what it's called. And as a result, I just got nuked. So I can't really do much about that. So this is the list that I ran at both events, and I have a full sideboard guide. This is kind of my not making any modifications outside of just like sideboarding and like how I went into it, so that you can kind of just see where it's evolved from. To go over the things that did not work or that have changed since before, and things that have worked. So I'll just go down. Flexors has been pretty good. I enjoy it. I think that it is also a little bit of preference. So if you don't want to get it, if you don't want to run it, you want to run approach grapplers, that's fine. I rather enjoy it because it's my oh shit button. The erase face against Syndra, they just have brand and fealty. So like for the most part, just erase face doesn't do much, and it's nice to have as a one of, in my opinion. But it doesn't do much against most of the rest of the field. So I like a one of so that I can put it, and when it comes up, I can play it from like a codex trigger or just play it raw, and it's good. The weakest link I still like because it kind of shares the same slot. I like it because it increases the matchup against stuff like Aurora still, mech a little bit. It also does well into all the MST heroes, which I particularly like, and it does a little bit against Prism. So I personally prefer having this card over this card. It also still blocks 3, and I think you need 6s in general. Hamstring Shot has been overperforming. It has made turn cycles for the opponent awkward, so I've had more blocks than not on this card. And against Syndra Redline, it literally says -3 damage on your 3 to 4 damage on your turn cycle because now you have to pitch one. The blue one, it can sometimes matter. It's less relevant into that matchup, but if they don't get a blue, or it could just make their turn a little bit awkward and at least save 1 damage, it's nice. Murkmire, I was winning games against Enigma without ever running this card. So I don't think you need it. I thought you did. It came up a couple times, but like as I continued playing more and more, I just didn't need it. It was a dead card in the deck. I still like the 2 premeditate. 1 is good, 2nd is good, 3rd ends up usually being worthless. So I ended up cutting it a while ago, and I like it. It's a nice ratio. Sedation, I don't like it. I can see why someone would run it. I don't like it because I think that it's so situational on when it matters, because sometimes they just go, okay, I'll take 6 and then send full hand, and if I had an arsenal at you, cool. And it didn't do anything. You just took the damage still. The Battlefield or Battlefront Bastion Blue has done exactly what it's intended to. It makes some blocks smoother. If they swing 5, I can drop this in front of it. Or if they swing 6, I can drop this in front of it and then throw a trap on it. Or 5, drop this, trap, and then protect against any kind of like flick knives or associated effects. It also acts as like a slight thing like Ancestral Harmony protection if you do it correctly. So like if you block a 3, you feel less bad playing a trap onto it when in blocking 5 on 4 with 1 floating prevention that still prevents the flick. So it just ends up working very nice. However, 2 and 3 end up being a little clunky, so I like it as a one of. It does its job. It's nice. Salvage Shot continues to be just nice for the long matchups. It has helped keeping like deck health. Calming Breeze. God, I talk so much crap about this card. 1 was always perfect, good, undisputed, good to have in the deck. 2 was always like, might be pushing it, but like I thought 2 can be fine, so I started running 2. And then I just started running 3, and I was like, this has to be too much. This has to be bad. This has to be like not efficient. But the problem is that this card ends up being just so incredibly efficient into a lot of matchups. Assassin, it ends up being really good into because you can just navigate around their daggers and some of their ping effects, and it just ends up being so good as a result. The Syndrome matchup, it allows you to block with this and a card and fully just not deal with mass the whole turn, because you can prevent the flick. And in some cases, if they go like with the blue build, if they go dagger dagger, you just Calming Breeze and it consumes dagger dagger, flick, and then whatever 0 for 3 that they go, and they can't mass the rest of that turn. For the most part, it's also nice into Wizard, which is pretty cool. The crew traps, those cards have been really frustrating lately. Tripwire Trap is always good because it's a 0 for 4 plus the 1 ping, so it's a 0 for 5. But the hit effect doesn't usually matter too much. You're usually full blocking anyways, or they just don't care about the on hit or something like that. Pitfall Trap though, they always have the resource. It's so frustrating sometimes. So I want to trim down to 5 because it has been clunky and frustrating sometimes. So, and with Shelter having the module thing, a lot of times you're just not playing it as that. And like I said, the Syndra thing, kind of frustrating. So in that matchup in particular, all these are being cut. In the deck list, I actually wanted to cut down to 5. Pendulum Trap has not been fantastic. It has been okay. I think it's a flex slot that you can kind of put whatever in. If you want to put a Sink Below to just have a little bit smoother hands, or an AB to hinge your percentage more into Wizards. There are so many things you can put in there, but I kind of liked it as the one of at this point, just because like it does help against the reaction-based matchups. You don't need it a huge amount, but sometimes it's relevant because you hit a CNC and you go, "That's dope." The extra 2 cards can kind of hinge a little bit against, say, new, where you don't have to worry nearly as much about their deck size, because it can sometimes get a little hairy at the end of the game. But that's my thoughts on that. That's pretty much everything about what has changed from this, but I'll talk about, and I'll put this list there, but I'll talk about how things have changed after all of that info and what the end result is. I was never against Molten Shot as an idea, but my thought was I didn't know what to cut, so I didn't have the time to test it correctly, so I didn't bother with it, because I would have to figure out, I'd have to test what I'm cutting and the card itself at the same time, as opposed to just knowing what I can switch out for other stuff, like testing the calming, which basically replaced trap stuff. That was easy to test because I already knew how those traps were working, so I could know whether or not it was worth putting in or taking out. So I just had to test that card exclusively and not if the card that I was cutting was relevant. Bolt and Shot, though, I had to test a little bit more layers. So the reason why I like this card is because what it does is a blue presents a 1 for 5 attack, go again. On hit, if they decide to not block it, and you have, say, a 1 cost or 2 cost, you can then send that and punish them. And then they took 5 damage, and now they have to block the second attack, which is just efficiency, because that's a 3-card hand. Or you can send like a CNC or something like that. Or weakest link. Or you can Codex and then grab a 2 cost. Or you can play Plan for the Worst, and then they took 5, and now you're grabbing a Collapsing Trap or whatever to punish them for their turn cycle. It also lets you push through damage against things like Vincent, who, like I said, was setting up a lot, and a lot of times they'll just want to give you 2 cards, banish one to Vincent, whether it's a card that has Blood Dead or not, and then play a Malefic or an Incantation and just set up. So Bolt and Shot lets you navigate around that a little bit better, in my opinion. So I cut Murkmire and the 2 Sedation Shot for these because they're a little bit more flexible. There wasn't really much changes for a lot of the core outside of just that change. The other thing that I did was I cut the 1 Pitfall in exchange for a Pummel. I identified that late game decks like Guardian, Florian, Verdance, and a lot of those kind of matchups, even Wizard to an extent, like other Wizards, you want to punish them for blocking, say, your CNC with 2 cards when you have tempo, because sometimes you'll just have full tempo. So if you send CNC and they have a card in Arsenal and they just say, here's 2 cards, I'm just going to send like a 0 for 4, and then, I don't know, or like play a Sigil, play a 0 for 4 because I buff off of the Baselio effect, or the weapon. This can then let you push and just say, okay, you're playing that Sigil now, and you're losing that other card in hand, and you're losing your arsenal you're protecting. So it can let you force tempo or make your opponent be put into an awkward situation. And I think you can hit combo pieces or just convert your, just like with the problem with Bone Shot, convert your hand fully into something that's just better into some of those matchups and generate tempo. Now, I think Pummel and Pendulum Trap are flex slots. So I think that you can easily switch these around for whatever suits your style, whether it's more attacks, different trap. Like I said, I was talking about the Sink Below. You could try Perch Grapplers or Crown, like I have considered a bit, though these would replace Flexers. You could, like I said, add attacks, something like Standing Order. If you want another Remembrance, granted I don't think you need it. Things like Cut Through the Facade if you really want to deal with aura stuff, or Quiver, or another AB, or something like Feign Death, Oasis, so that you can deal with the wizards a little bit more. There's just so many things that you can do, but I think that the core is pretty much perfect. I would not change anything outside of maybe if the Sedation or Withering turn up to not doing well or not being relevant, I might switch it to a Salvage Shot to just increase the late game a little bit. I have considered a 1 of Searing Shot as a really good Codex target on a no card hand, because Searing Shot does equal 5, which is strictly better than a Endless Arrow in a lot of cases. Plus, Endless Arrow, if it hits, it ends up being a card in hand, which kind of sucks sometimes whenever you're codexing. So having a card that doesn't go back to your hand lets you still dig through with the Ponder is nice. But I'll put this list up. This is my test live list. So for the most part, this is going to be continued to be updated until I'm satisfied, and then make a version 7 or whatever kind of list. I'm just going to go through it a little bit slowly real quick so that you can see it in case it does change. So that if you like this version and for some reason you're looking at this later, you now see all the stuff in it. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. This is a culmination of all the experience and some of the testing and pretty much everything that I've went through. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'm more than happy to try to answer whatever weird questions you may have, because why Endless Arrow at 2, for example? Slots. Well, appreciate joining me.